Memphis, 1973. Behind the wrought-iron gates of Graceland, the king of rock and roll sits alone in his throne room, staring at a photograph of the woman who once called him her world. The pills scattered across his mahogany desk catch the light like fallen stars, while somewhere in the mansion's hollow corridors, the ghost of laughter echoes, a reminder of what love looked like before fame devoured it whole. This is not the story they sold to the magazines. This is the truth behind the sequined jumpsuits and million-dollar smiles. This is how a king lost his queen, and how paradise became a prison built of gold records and broken promises. The first time Elvis Aaron Presley saw Priscilla, she was 14 and dancing to his own voice on a jukebox in a dimly lit cafe in Bad Nauheim, Germany. It was 1959, and he was serving his country, playing soldier while his heart played hooky from duty. She moved like liquid mercury in her powder blue dress, completely unaware that destiny was watching her from across the room with hungry blue eyes. "Christ," he whispered to his friend Red West, cigarette smoke curling around his words like a prayer. "Look at that little angel." But Priscilla was no angel. She was something far more dangerous. She was innocence wrapped in silk stockings, a challenge to a man who had conquered everything except his own restless heart. When their eyes met across that crowded room, the jukebox seemed to skip, and Elvis felt something he hadn't experienced since his mama died, the terrifying, exhilarating sensation of falling. Their courtship began like a fairy tale, scripted by Tennessee Williams, all southern charm and hidden darkness. Elvis would pick her up in his BMW, driving through the German countryside while she sat beside him, intoxicated by the smell of his cologne and the promise of a world beyond her stepfather's military discipline. He spoke of Memphis like it was Camelot, and she listened like he was reading her the gospel. "When I get back to the States," he told her one evening as they sat by the Rhine, his army uniform crisp in the moonlight, "I'm gonna make you a queen, darling. We're gonna live in a mansion so beautiful, it'll make Versailles look like a trailer park." She was 16 when he left Germany, and 17 when she finally came to Graceland. Those months apart had been an eternity of letters, perfumed with longing, and phone calls that lasted until dawn. She thought she knew what she was walking into: luxury, love, and the life she dreamed of since she was old enough to understand that some people were born to shine brighter than others. What she found instead was a golden cage disguised as paradise, and a man whose love came with a price tag written in heartbreak and pills. Graceland in 1963 was a monument to excess and loneliness, its rooms filled with everything money could buy and nothing money could heal. Elvis had transformed Priscilla from a teenager into his vision of perfection, her hair teased higher, her makeup applied heavier, her wardrobe selected to match his increasingly eccentric taste. She became his living doll, beautiful and silent, existing solely for his pleasure and convenience. "You're mine now, Scylla," he would whisper as he watched her apply her makeup each morning, the ritual as precise as a religious ceremony. "Every inch of you belongs to the king," and she did belong to him in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. She lived in his shadow, attending his parties, but rarely speaking, watching him command rooms full of sycophants and hangers-on who laughed too loudly at his jokes and agreed too quickly with his opinions. She was Mrs. Elvis Presley in everything but name, a title that came with privileges she'd never imagined and responsibilities that slowly suffocated her spirit. The pills started, early little white helpers that Elvis claimed would give him energy for his performances and peace for his sleepless nights. But Priscilla watched him spiral deeper into a chemical haze, his mood swinging from manic euphoria to crushing depression without warning. She became his caretaker, his enabler, his silent witness to the gradual destruction of the man she'd fallen in love with. "Don't look at me like that," he snarled one night after a particularly brutal argument. about his drug use. I'm still the king, baby. I'm still the man who pulled you out of that boring little life and gave you everything you ever wanted. But what she'd wanted was love, not ownership. What she dreamed of was partnership, not servitude. As the years passed, she realized she'd traded her authentic self for a golden prison, her dreams for his nightmares, her voice for his silence about the truth of their crumbling paradise. The woman in the mirror each morning looked like Priscilla Presley, but felt like a stranger wearing someone else's face, beautiful, perfectly coiffed, and slowly dying inside. Colonel Tom Parker was the spider at the center of Elvis's web, spinning lies with the same skill that his clients spun records into gold. He watched Priscilla with calculating eyes, seeing her not as a woman, but as a potential threat to his carefully constructed empire. Love, in the Colonel's experience, had a way of making men do foolish things like wanting to tour internationally or make serious films instead of the profitable fluff that kept the money flowing. That girl, he told Elvis during one of their private meetings in Graceland's office, cigar smoke creating a haze around his words. She's changing you, boy, making you soft. A king don't need a queen, he needs subjects. But Elvis was already too deep in his own web to escape. The pills that once gave him energy now controlled his every waking moment. His performances became increasingly erratic, his personal relationships strained beyond recognition. Priscilla watched helplessly as the man she loved disappeared behind a pharmaceutical fog, replaced by someone she barely recognized, paranoid, violent, and utterly lost. The Beatles had arrived in America, and suddenly Elvis's music seemed as outdated as his pompadour. Younger, hungrier artists were claiming his throne, and the pressure to remain relevant drove him deeper into his chemical cocoon. Priscilla found herself managing not just a household, but a madman whose grip on reality grew more tenuous with each passing day. "I made you," he screamed at her during one of his increasingly frequent rages, throwing a crystal vase against the wall where it shattered like their dreams. "I can unmake you just as easily. Without me, you're nothing but a nobody from Germany." The cruelest part was that he wasn't entirely wrong. She'd been so young when their story began that she'd never had the chance to discover who she was, outside of being Elvis's woman. Her identity was so intertwined with his that she couldn't tell where Priscilla ended and Mrs. Presley began. Late at night, she would walk the empty halls of Graceland, past the gold records and the gaudy decorations, feeling like a ghost haunting her own life. The fairy tale had become a horror story, and she was both the princess and the prisoner, trapped in a tower made of fame and sustained by pills, lies, and the fading memory of what love used to feel like. By 1972, their marriage had become a performance more elaborate than anything Elvis had ever staged in Las Vegas. They moved through Graceland like polite strangers, sharing a bed but not their hearts, speaking in carefully modulated tones that revealed nothing of the devastation beneath. The pills had won. Elvis was their slave now, not their master, and Priscilla had become the keeper of a man who was slowly dying in front of the entire world. The night she finally decided to leave, Elvis was passed out on his throne-like chair in the den, still wearing his jumpsuit from the previous night's concert. A half-empty bottle of pills lay scattered across the coffee table like confetti from a celebration no one wanted to attend. She stood in the doorway for what felt like hours, memorizing the face that had launched 1,000 dreams and destroyed just as many. Before she could leave, she needed to write the letter she'd been composing in her heart for years. Sitting at the antique writing desk in their bedroom, she poured her soul onto paper with shaking hands. Asterisk, my dearest Elvis, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not because I stopped loving you, but because loving you is killing us both. You are the most magnificent and tragic man I've ever known, a king who conquered the world but lost himself in the process. I fell in love with the boy who promised me the stars. But I can't watch the man you've become destroy everything beautiful we once shared. These pills, this prison we've built around ourselves, this performance we call marriage, none of it is love anymore. I'm taking our daughter and leaving because someone needs to survive this story. Someone needs to remember what we were before the music died and the pills took over. I loved you completely, Elvis. I loved you until it broke me. Maybe someday you'll find your way back to the man I married. If you do, you'll know where to find me. Until then, goodbye, my love. Goodbye, my king. Forever yours in memory. Priscilla. She left the letter on his pillow, knowing he would hold it long after she was gone. A tangible piece of the love they'd lost. I loved you, she whispered to his unconscious form. God help me, I still do. But I can't watch you die anymore. Elvis, I can't be your accomplice in this suicide disguised as a career. The divorce papers were filed quietly, without fanfare or press conferences. The king's subjects were told it was an amicable separation, two people growing apart, naturally. The truth that she was fleeing for her life from a man whose love had become indistinguishable from his addiction remained, locked within Graceland's walls. Elvis took the news with surprising calm, as if he'd been expecting it for years. I understand, darling, he said, his voice hollow as the mansion around them. I know what I've become. I know what I've done to you. To us. They held each other one last time in the foyer, where she'd first entered as his teenage bride, now leaving as a woman who'd aged a lifetime in a decade. The marble floors that had once seemed magical now felt cold beneath her feet, and the chandelier that had dazzled her young eyes now cast shadows that looked like prison bars. Will you remember me as I was? He asked, and for a moment she glimpsed the boy from Germany who'd promised her the world. Always, she replied, and meant it. The gates of Graceland closed behind her with a finality that echoed like a death knell. 5 years later, those same gates would be draped in black, and the world would mourn the king who had died alone in his golden cage, surrounded by everything he'd ever wanted, except the one thing that might have saved him. Real, honest, uncomplicated love. The tragic love story of Elvis and Priscilla remains one of music's most haunting romances, a tale of dreams deferred, love corrupted, and the price of fame paid in heartbreak. Their story reminds us that behind every legend lies a human being, vulnerable and flawed, searching for connection in a world that demands perfection. Want more untold stories from music's golden age? Subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive content about the real lives behind the legends. Because sometimes the truth is more powerful than any song.